Today, I have the honor of welcoming Lorenzo Cardim, a Brazilian visual artist, performer, and sculptor whose work expands the boundaries of perception, identity, and body itself. Lorenzo moves between sculpture, performance, and public innovations, creating works that invite us to question how we see, how we feel, and how we inhabit in our own bodies. His art blurs the lines between objective and presence, self and environments. Also, we share a very special bond through our time in France last year when we both got to know each other through our artist in residency. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Lorenzo, I'm so happy to have you here. Welcome to Decoding the Flow.
Thank you so much for having me.
When did the body parts become such a central medium for you?
Also, these are great questions. I'll cover them as broadly as I can. I took a bunch of notes. I was in New York this weekend, and it was a great opportunity for me to write a bunch of things in the train on the way back as I was thinking about this. So this is a great opportunity and really helpful, as an artist to like take time and think about the stuff we do and write and communicate it. So thank you for the opportunity. So excited to be here also because I really love you. Our connection in France was amazing. Your question, well, my work in the past few years has been revolving around the human form of the body, how we relate to one another. Um, and I've focused primarily on sculpture and performance and textile work. I would say it's been 5 years since I have done a performance art piece. This past month was my first performance in 5 years. So it's kind of interesting to think about to think of myself as a performance artist. I think I do a little bit of everything, but in the last few years, it's been more focused on sculpture. But I've always felt that the body is not just a subject, in my work as a material. When I was drawing and painting before sculpture, I was also focused on the human figure. I'm really interested in the contours of the body. I love how, even abstractly, how the body is represented and what it means and how political it can be. So when I carve, I think of carving gesture. When I stitch fabric, I think it often echoes my need to mend. I love to think of stitching. Is more than textile. Is more about what I do with the textile, the mending, the bringing parts together. I don't know, maybe mending a wound or a point of care. And when I perform, I'm usually asking the body, not just my body, sometimes are the performers' bodies, what the body knows about language that we cannot quite express in the other mediums or media. So I think that kind of encapsulates like how I move from one work to the other. I don't think they're necessarily separate for me. I think they do echo each other. I feel like it's nice having the space to express different things in different works. Like performance lets the work move through time. It's time based. I think my sculptures, they hold the movement in place. So it's like a residue of the performance sometimes. And textile for me, like I mentioned, is more like a skin, something protective and intimate.
Beautiful. And your sculpture, it's in woodwork, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And mostly, yeah. And especially in the last 10 years, I've kind of narrowed most of my sculpture practice in carving, traditional wood carving, especially.
It's fascinating. I remember when we were in France and you were like just working outside carving your beautiful, perfectly sculpted hands. And I was just sit there with you. And sometimes we want to be alone when we're creating. And we always have somebody enjoying Lorenzo's process. So it's beautiful. You have to check it out, his work. So if you were to describe the emotional and philosophical foundation of your work today, what it would be?
I think emotion for me it lives in the body. before it lives in words, especially in the last few years since COVID. I think the need for me to communicate that emotion, of longing, of wanting to be close to others. I'm Brazilian. I've lived here forever, but I still have this Brazilianness, like I love people. I love hugging, kissing, touching. This is how we talk, in my country. So I felt the need to express that even more through my sculptures. So sometimes it's very subtle. Lately, I think it's becoming more overt, because I'm adding two hands together, or there's a relationship between two pieces, not just one. I think to me, they're very emotive.
And I love how you, as a Brazilian, show your cultural roots into your work like so deeply and so poetic. It's beautiful. Since we are talking about being artists living abroad, how has travel and living in different places expanded your artistic voice?
That's a really good question. Okay, so it's something that I've questioned since I moved here. The need to belong. It's not a desire to belong so I feel safe only. It's part of it, but it's really the need to feel like you're part of something, part of a family. Brazilians have a natural, I mean, at least from where we're from, I I can speak from experience. It's pretty natural to us to um to make people feel welcome. And I feel like that's something that I felt like a foreigner for years. I think now I feel like this is home to me.
Yeah.
And it's finally, yeah, it's been interesting to see how like it's been a quest to feel like I belong here. Like of course don't lose your accents. You always, there's always something about you that is not quite local,
Longing.
right? Yeah, you feel it, like maybe the color of your skin sometimes, or the way you dress, the way you move your hands. I think all that stuff, it's interesting to me, and I think it's affected my work. How we judge people and see people based on how they communicate and how they appear. So I know I went off topic.
I
Yeah,
want to keep digging into this us because I am Brazilian too. And so we definitely share this. And I always think of myself, would I be painting what I'm painting? Would I be doing what I'm doing if I was back home? And you
correct.
question yourself.
Yes. When I go to Brazil and I see Brazilian artists, and I've met a few, I've had the pleasure of working there on one project. It's interesting how I don't, it's a different kind of connection and a different kind of need that I needed to fulfill when I was there. The way I was expressing myself, the way I was talking about my work, the way I was making was different. So I think it does that. It's kind of we are in a different place, so we can show a side of ourselves that is um, different. But I do
Yeah.
think that there is a kind of fluidity, right, that comes um, with being in between places. Like, no, this is home to me, but I kind of feel like I live in between here and there. Like,
Yeah.
I still speak the language and I talk to my family all the time. This shifting of identity, I think that I'm constantly thinking about identity. I think it sharpens how like I understand perception. Like I think I mentioned that the way how like our bodies are read depending on where we stand. So I think it's just that part of identity, even if it's not politicized, something that's always in my mind. Every time I speak, every time I move.
Yeah. And I think you touched on something that's so beautiful earlier, talking about your need to belonging, especially that we're not from here. So we literally need to make ourselves feel belonging where we actually don't belong. So, so I think that art practice it plays a huge role, at least for me too. It's almost like, well, I left my family behind, I left my culture behind, I left all of my friends, all of my half of my life's history. What can I make it here? to make it worth everything that I left behind. So my only answer was to do something that I truly love and that I can always be expanding and exploring myself and also bringing that part of me, because every creative act, anything that we create, even if it's unconscious, we always bringing parts of ourselves, our narratives, our memories, everything that we lived. So it is almost like I'm here now and I'm going to make sure that I will put that Brazilian roots into everything that I create in the form of honoring what we left behind.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's interesting that even when I'm writing an artist statement or making a piece, sometimes a piece has nothing to do with identity or me. I see like my um the like Brazilian roots, like the sounds, the textures, the color. There's something that comes through, even memories of my family, longing, space, separation. I keep seeing like a trend, and I've seen it since I ever, like since I moved here. So I think it's a part of who we are. And then this idea of like being away from our family, it's really something that I struggle with.
Yeah.
It's really difficult, and I think it comes into work more than I like to admit sometimes. I think it's subtle, and people look at it and they're like, "It's not subtle. It's pretty clear. That's what you're talking about."
And the older we get, the harder it is becoming. Do you feel that too?
Yes.
Gosh, every time I go to Brazil now, it just becomes harder and harder. And it's so interesting to see how we have that perception. It's almost like we don't even belong there either.
Correct.
So
No,
we
that
literally
is,
live in
yeah.
this completely divided place. And I think art has this power to make us belong and bring those two separate parts of ourselves into one thing that represents both.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I love that. And I every time I read statements and I talk to artists who are travelers, even if they're Americans, but they travel a lot, and they describe their work as themselves as not quite feeling like that one place is home. They have different homes, or they don't quite belong just in one place. I think yeah, when I go to Brazil, like I don't feel 100% Brazilian.
We don't even feel belong in there either.
No.
Our families doing things that we did in our childhood, and there's still a missing part of you. So you always have to be comfortable on that in between worlds, and or for us that are creators, creating new words so we can belong there. Let's dive into your biggest work that it's about the Cathedral of the Notre Dame. I think it's a brilliant work that you participated.
I study fine art and design. So
Mhm.
I work in an architecture school. So I teach digital modeling, and I've taught fabrication and design build as we call it here, because I do work, in an architecture school. I'm the associate dean of administration in finance, but also I was the fabrication director for years. A few years ago, we were approached right after the fire, of the cathedral, when the cathedral burned down. We were approached by a wonderful organization and Hands House, and they wanted to reconstruct one of the trusses that sits above the choir in the cathedral. And it was a huge endeavor that involved a huge group of people, designers, like digital designers, fabricators, and they couldn't do it alone. And they also needed uh, the endorsement of an institution like ours, a Catholic university institution, which was super connected to to the larger institution, Catholic institution. So they came to us. They proposed this project to us, and they invited me and another architect. She's a architecture professor here, and the two of us with them created worked on the reconstruction of one of the trusses. And the final piece was going to be placed in the cathedral. Lots of bureaucracy, 3 years of insane amount of work, and we were able to not send the model to France because of expenses. We send the carpenters, the professionals that worked with us with our contributions, and they worked on the cathedral in France. So it's in short, I mean, it's a very complex project. So to summarize it in less than a minute is really hard. So I was part of a design team, discovery team. I had drawings from the uh, 1200s, original drawings that I have to interpret, help figure out geometries that were hard to decipher, and help them recreate this gigantic structure that not it didn't go directly to the cathedral, but then they were able to build one that replaced it.
It's about beauty, right?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, tradition, beauty, history, memory. Talk about memory, right? I mean, we were honoring the memory of craftspeople from 800 years ago, and the one of the goals was to not destroy it and make it new with new materials, was to really honor the way it was made, when it was initially built. Same materials, same techniques, some traditional techniques. I get to learn all of it. I knew some, and I was able to teach because it was part of a class that we taught here, those techniques to students. And then get the original drawings from the cathedral. Actually, I was able, and then we had the architects from the cathedral come here and hang out with us, and I spent time with them and talk about the construction. It felt amazing. And at the time, you're so busy that you don't think about it. You don't think about what you're doing. But once we saw the whole thing come together, it was overwhelming, but it felt like such a privilege. And there was just like little things that I was just part of a large team of people, moving things along, and I was just happy to be connected to it. National Geographic did a segment on the cathedral, like it was a February issue, I think 2 years ago, and they talked to me and a couple other historians, and they put me in the magazine and
Oh
named
my
me.
God. You have to show that.
Yeah,
Put in
yeah,
show
it's really
notes.
cool. It's on my page. I did.
Okay.
It was
It's
pretty
okay.
cool. It was a great gift, and then they ended up having those images placed around the cathedral for a couple of years. Yeah, so it was fun, like walking by the cathedral and seeing, like
See my name in there.
it was fun. My students are in France, and they kept going there and taking photos in front of it. But it's humbling. I was just,
So proud. It's brilliant. Congratulations on that. We definitely put the article on the show notes so people can really get
yeah,
to know what
the
exactly
organization.
was done. Thank you so much for sharing that. This podcast, it's all about creative consciousness, which is the realization that we are here to create life. And by creating life, I mean you understand that you have the power to create the life that you want. And when you hear the term creative consciousness, what does it mean to you?
It's a great, it's a great question too, because I think it means so many different things
Yeah.
to us. I mean, to me, it's the practice of listening, and kind of deeply, consistently, and like um, without trying to rush meaning or to rush to meaning. Something that I had to learn. I I think that I was a figure skater. I was a competitive figure skater. When I moved to the US, I was competing until my 20s, and I always focused on discipline and perfection, landing the jump and finishing, thinking about consistency and the end product. And the older I got, and the more focused on making that I became, I learned to slow down and allow for pauses. And I think that like creative consciousness to me falls into that, like waiting for the pause. I've carved several hands for several months in a row, and they're not saying anything to me. And at one point I stopped and I started asking, and then I reworked some of them. And that's when the meaning came. So I think that is pause is creative consciousness without thinking, arriving at the flow, of making that process where you You don't even know what your hands are doing there, present. Like you said, it's not a reaction. Of course, I think it's a consequence of practice in learning the craft, and then eventually stepping back and letting your mind and your unconscious do the work.
With the work. Yeah, exactly. And I love it how you said it's so beautiful because when I say non-reactive, you truly need to pause before you act. So that pause, it's so important. It's also the active listening that I think you were talking about. And we Brazilians tend to speak and talk loud and speak with our hands. So it is definitely something that I try to put in practice like every day. So I love that you shared that. And the flow states, it's totally connected because, like you said, you kind of have to have a certain degree of mastering your craft, knowing what you were doing, because one of the triggers of flow states, it is exactly that. You have to kind of expand the way you do a certain thing. So you do have to have a certain level of knowledge and just try to push a little bit to make it a little bit harder, or maybe you can do it in less time or like in a different way that will definitely trigger the flow states. So thank you for sharing. And
I
I mean,
agree.
the whole name of the podcast is Decoding the Flow.
I love that. I love that. It was
It is.
perfect. Perfect name. And it's interesting too because you brought back like the idea of Brazilianness, something that people don't understand. Like Brazilians, like obviously not all Brazilians, many Brazilians that we know has this cultural, like the way we communicate, right? It's a very open and very um expressive, right, and way to communicate because of our families. It's like part of the core of my family. I have three siblings, and if we didn't speak up, we would never get heard. If we didn't scream, if we don't yell, we don't get heard. It's not a quiet culture for most parts.
Yeah. If you go and have dinner with a few Brazilians, you're gonna think that we are fighting.
Correct.
One more loud than the other. To bring that to America, people are not gonna even pay attention to you because
No,
it is like a lack of respect.
correct.
When
We smile too much,
we hug too early.
but while making, you know, and especially when you're making your work, your own work, you slow down. The conversation gets quiet. Quiet. And it's interesting to see that because I'm still Brazilian, I'm still like the same person, but I can see everything around.
Falls apart.
Yeah. So that is pretty interesting.
Yeah, that a flow state that is something that I'm so passionate about. And it is not something that it is activated every single time that I paint. There's certain things that need to happen. And when you are in flow, if you are rationalizing if you're in flow or not, you're just out of the flow because you don't think your inner critic, it falls down. So you literally have that feedback loop that just show you exactly what you need to do next. You don't even question. You just become one thing, the activity in hands, which it is a beautiful thing. That's why I consider art the most spiritual thing that we
I wrote spiritual on my notes. It's just in flow to me. Yes. It's prayer light, but even more so sometimes because prayer, you sometimes you're too aware of your environment.
yeah.
When I get to that space when I'm making and not thinking, I forget it's been 7 hours and my hands hurt and my back hurts. Just when I feel like I have to stop.
That's exactly how I went into flow because it happened a few times. And I remember I had to work in a drawing. It was like a large moon. It was the first time that I was doing it, a moon, and I used pointillism, like tiny little dots on a gigantic circle. And I sat down on my table before deadline for this exhibition and I draw this moon with a million dots. And I saw my clock, it was 6 hours had passed by. And then I was like, how? how I did not feel hungry. I did not feel thirsty. It was like nothing was bothering me. So in my mind, while I was on that flow, it was like 1 hour. And it was like, how is that even possible? The 6 hours, you don't even notice. So then I got so curious that I went into research mode. What the hell just happened? And ended up being flow states. So I'm so happy that you mentioned that so we can share more about what flow is because it's brilliant. It is not something that just artists can achieve. Like, I mean, you can be in flow, like having dinner with your best friends.
Agree.
Like you can, as long as you are focused on that activity in hand, you fully focus on that, you can totally activate a flow. And there's a few studies that also talks about the group flows when you're in a meeting and everybody
Oh
wants
yeah.
to solve something and everybody's kind of on the same wavelength. It's fascinating.
And that takes me to collaboration. And one of the things I love about performing performance art is that I get to work with other artists. Yeah,
Mm.
and we get to create together. We get to move together. And you, I just had a performance with a friends from France, Sabria Shipley and Jesse Hansen. It was just beautiful. And the three of us were connected and we were totally in sync. He had not like practiced. Oh, it was scary. And I told him, I said, I wasn't worried. I get a feeling that everything was going to come together. But it was just beautiful to see the work, and Sabria singing and Jesse writing and me stitching. It was just something magical. I mean, that word is dangerous, but it was spiritual. Definitely felt like.
I bet. I have another question. It goes along with what we were talking about entering into flow states. Do you have any rituals or practices that help you enter flow states, or at least to put you into that intention? Because it is not our decision if you're going to be in flow or not. So you can put that intention like before your art practice. What are some rituals that you can share with us that maybe some other artists or other people listening can incorporate it into their practices as well?
Not so much ritual. I don't think of them as much as maybe they are. They probably are more ritualistic than I think. Cleaning my space. Yeah, I love cleaning. I think that gets me in touch with the space. That is my own personal ritual. I come in, I know I'm going to work for 5, 6 hours. I spend the first 45 minutes getting the place clean and ready. Work with very sharp objects. Once I start carving, I don't like being distracted. Like the clothing that I wear, everything has to be um, the, the right kind. So even leave before I leave the house, I have to think about. I have to prepare. So I think that depending on what medium you use, I think organizing, your space, making your space form of a sanctuary, like that is ready for work, I think is important. I mean, I know some artists work in chaos. I have friends who they can be in a clean environment and they don't know what their paintbrushes are, but they find it. For me, I need my ritual would be to get everything organized and have everything at hand and not get distracted, when I work. It would be to experiment, figure out what works for you. Not having a phone, nearby. You could be playing music, and which I love too. Sometimes music is what takes me, to that place. But not thinking about time, not thinking about the phone itself or things that I have to do. Another beautiful thing that I teach my students here is because working in a fabrication shop is kind of dangerous. I mean, all the machines and equipment, including carving tools, can really get seriously injured. You have to be present, forget about like the next 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and you have to be present at least for enough time so it's safe, to do what you're doing. So I think, all that combined would be my ritual practice. If I have to come in and work for 15 minutes, that might not be enough time, for me to get into that space.
They say the flow states you have to have a minimum of 90 minutes. routine in one specific task, fully focus. Because until you get there, it kind of have certain things needs to happen, like in your brain waves needs to slow down. So the focus part, like there is a must if you wanted to create anything brilliant, to be honest. It's more than proof that nobody can multitask. We think that we can multitask, but we're just doing two things with a split energy. So ended up not being your best.
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
I always tell students if you go to an interview, whatever you do, don't brag about multitasking.
Yeah.
That myth is it's
Yeah.
completely debunked.
Agree.
Everyone knows. So yeah, I think that, you know, maybe that is a ritual is a good way to describe, my process before making.
Yeah. Let's talk about France. So Lorenzo and I, we met last year during our artist in residency, international artist in residency. So we had a group of 15, maybe a little bit more artists from around the world. We all went to this chateau in France. We had this beautiful 2 weeks artist residency where we could work in whatever we want. We also needed to present our work and do studio visits and connect one to another. How does this experience shaped your art practice today?
Hmm. Being friends, the residency came at a place when I really needed to slow down. Being friends away from the rhythm of my day to day, like really allowed me to listen to the work in a new way. I wasn't producing. I was really tuning in when I was there. I didn't, I knew it's kind of funny because I had my playlist. I was going to make it work. I was going to make it perfect no matter what. Yeah. I just had no idea how incredibly spiritual the experience was, how it became a little bit about making, being spoiled, giving my art time and energy in ways that I don't do when I'm here, especially with the Notre Dame project and this other project that I did. It took another year and a half. I hadn't given that kind of energy to it. But the spiritual part to me, the connection to the other artists, like I had this image in my head, people holding people. That's how I describe the residency. It became transcendent, if that's the word to define for me. Like it took a couple days for me to put into words how I was feeling when I was there. I wrote every day, but in the first 40 minutes, I was walking down with Erica Morales, one of the artists, and it's like she was my sister. It felt like she was my sister, and I was spilling. I am very private. I was spilling my guts to her, and she was spilling her guts to. This was 40 minutes after Friday. I had barely put my stuff in my room, and I felt connected. I felt like the energy. It was the the right energy, the right place, everybody with the frequency, if you believe that. Like we're humming to the same frequency, and we were not afraid to be vulnerable. We're not afraid to share. We're not afraid to reach out, put our art to the side for a day, and connect to somebody else's art or whatever they're dealing with. So yes, thinking in short is like became so much more than just having space to make.
Yeah.
Just having a beautiful setting, which was stunning, and being taken care of, having food made for us. Really became um, uh, a, a sanctuary,
Yeah.
and I felt like just family, like that we were family, that there's nothing you could say to me that I couldn't work out, and nothing you could do that I couldn't figure out, because that's what families do. So,
How you describe it is just so poetic and exactly the way I felt. Family. So we still have contact with that group up until today, and I don't think it's ever going away. And I love it how you put about energy, and I like to think that We share the same with certain people at the exactly same time as you. It is energy colliding one another. It already means something. I thought it was just me because the place is just so marvelous. And everybody was kind of in this ecstatic mode when we all got there. So, and then we would look like in each other's eyes, and everybody was just living to the fullest, being with that group only invited that deeper connection, that deeper emotion and vulnerability. Everybody felt so close in an instant. It was amazing.
Yeah, it really was. I keep trying, to figure out. I mean, I know that the organizer, the chateau, uh, directors, founders, I mean, they're part of the experience. They were in the background, and the staff, obviously, everyone, they were in the background, making sure that the we had a place to to enter that flow, right? I mean, to like
Yeah.
connect in the same frequency and to produce and not be distracted. I give them a lot of credit. I think in the curation, the way they brought us together, like it made space for us. So I think their energy is a part of the deal. I don't think that we can we could do that without their care. I felt there was a lot of care. You know, so
Absolutely, and just made us feel so special. Each of us had a room and a studio, or it could be combined, or the studio would be in a separate place, but you all have our names on it. We all had our place. We had like homemade meals made by a chef in every single meal that would sit down family style in this
no
beautiful.
phones.
It was magical. It was magical. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, we with conversations without pressure. Like
Yeah,
we had that. Like we
yeah.
just sit down and just have these beautiful conversations just about art and philosophy and making, not caring about the end product as much. You know, I think just yeah, just having that space without too many distractions.
And just to the fact that when you leave your own environment to go somewhere else that's specific for new creations, you don't bring your life with you, which I think that's exactly why allowed ourselves to be so vulnerable and to be so open and calm on that super safe environment. So artists in residency, if you had a chance, do it. It is an incredible opportunity, not just for visual artists, but for performers, writers, you name it. Lorenzo, I have one more question for you. One truth you wish more people understood about art and body, since your work is with the body parts.
I wrote. I didn't know you're gonna ask this question. Just hammer.
You are well prepared.
No, I've been writing. I think I've been writing a little bit about this. So I may not answer the question, but I've been thinking about,
Love to share your thoughts with us. Absolutely.
and I love that you bring that up. I would just like as maker for people to think about what does it mean to reach for someone, not knowing if they'll meet you there.
Mm.
You know, like how do we shape one another through gestures, both given or withheld? Like one of my hopes as a maker, as an artist, and working with students, in an institution, is that we connect with each other. I hope that the phone phase is a phase that will go back to a certain form of personal connection. And I believe that there are many ways to make that happen. I think art is an avenue for that.
To our go back to valuing more connections, personal connections,
Yeah, making
of online. Yeah.
stuff with their hands, like write, like read, I don't know, like talk to people, reach out to people. I think that's something I've been thinking a lot about, like not so much how to make stuff, but why, I'm making stuff.
I think this whole thing that you mentioned so beautiful, like using your body for connection, either reaching out to people, but also making something, using your body to create something. cooking or writing or anything,
Bring a letter to someone.
but notice how much you are consuming comparing to how much you are creating it. The creation part, it always needs to be the focus on your day to day that of consume. I mean, we are creators, right?
Yeah, we are. Can't escape that.
Lorenzo, I'd love for you to share anything else if I missed a question from your preparation, also where people can find you. Also gonna put everything on the show notes, but I would love for you to share.
Thank you so much. Yes,
Absolutely.
it's a great opportunity. I love it. And it's nice hanging out with you. It's
I
been a
know. To be here forever.
Best of luck with everything. This is so wonderful. Like you put so much energy into creating and sharing and connecting people. It's really powerful. I really hope that I know you know, but I really hope that you have some kind of feedback that kind of tells you how important this is for us, not just artists, for people who are allies, they're interested.
Yeah. The main thing for me, because I listen to a lot of podcasts, especially artists' podcasts, and I saw a huge gap because usually what you listen on an artist podcast or art podcasts, it's usually either about strategies or how to get your work seen or how to show it up on social media, like systems to make a living as an artist, which everything is valuable, everything is it's beautiful and it's helpful. But for me, and that's why I wanted to use the word creative consciousness because it goes direct into the deepest layer of our psychic. Like people don't talk about that enough. And then I even researched this term creative consciousness, and then nobody's talking about this. It was like, oh my gosh, this is what is going to save us
Well,
from living in reaction, from living in fear paradigm. Like creative consciousness is something that it can be part of our day to day and can totally change the whole game of us being in this reaction mode. Once you understand, like, no, I am a creative, like I am part of this creative world, so what can I do to create, to help create the world I want to live in?
love that. Just an FYI to artists, it's okay to have different jobs. It's okay to go through phases, but you can still, like, I work in administration now. I've been doing this for a few years. I make many parts of my administrative job creatively. Me create, like a creative endeavor, the way I organize my desk, the way I surround myself with, you know, these models my students work, the way I move through the day. So it doesn't have to be cut and dry, and then you separate creativity from, a business like environment.
I think that that's the whole point. Like, you don't have to have a full-time art career to be a creative. You can add the creative consciousness into literally everything that you do. Even if you are behind your desk 9 to 5, you can still have the artist eyes, that curiosity take into your life. It's like about curiosity. It's about wonder. It's about seeing things anew. It is something most of the people are in autopilot. So creative consciousness is the opposite of that. That we can incorporate it at any area of our life.
My current website has some new images of the work that I'm producing now. It's really fun. I'm excited about posting more in a couple of months. So my name, Lorenzo Cardim, .com, and I'll be posting more stuff on Instagram, a lot of process images, and I'm excited. Winter is a good time for making for me, so I'm excited.
Amazing.
Yeah, next 3-4
Amazing.
months I'll be producing a little more.
I can't wait. Lorenzo, thank you so much for this time with us, for sharing your light, your wisdom, and all of your work. And I'm going to put everything. Please check Lorenzo out, follow him, and hopefully I will have you again in the future.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.